Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Red, White, and Matt Show with Kenny. Today is episode number 34, and we will be discussing the Jeep Cherokee issue, Clarence Thomas, the Newsome Recall, and the Virginia death penalty. And lastly, of course, we will be following that up with our great quizzes that you guys always appreciate and love.
Today in 2021, as Chief of the Cherokee Nation, I am saying categorically that I think it's wrong to use our name to peddle a vehicle.
Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation has asked Jeep to stop using the tribe's name on its SUVs. Jeep has sold SUVs using the Cherokee name since 1974.
For most people, tribes don't even maybe seem real in terms of their experience. It seems something in history, and naming something after something in history probably doesn't feel too bad, particularly if it engenders some strong positive emotions. But I think in this year, 2021, we ought to be talking about the fact that tribes are still here. We're vibrant. We do a great deal for our people and our communities, and that our names mean something. And they've been here a lot longer than the Jeep Company and other corporations that have seized our name for profit.
Is there some way that Jeep could use that name that you'd be fine with it?
Well, there's no way that they could use the name that I would be fine with it. It certainly doesn't honor us by using that name, and it was surely never intended to.
Our vehicle names have been carefully chosen and nurtured over the years to honor and celebrate Native American people for their nobility, prowess,
But one might draw a distinction between a case like this and the case of, for example, the Washington Redskins. Clearly caricatures, these were offensive terms. Cherokee is simply a name. Why is that offensive?
I think comparing it to the Redskin name, you're right, there's a difference there. But it's still the case that the Cherokee name belongs to a people, an actual nation. And I think Jeep and its parent company set out to do what they did, which is to commercialize it, which is to capitalize on the picture that people have in their minds about Native Americans and Cherokee, and associate that with a brand and to make money in the process. Nothing wrong with making money or using branding. There is something wrong with taking the name of a proud Native people and doing that.
You know, I kind of mixed on this because, I kind of understand where the gentleman's coming from, but at the same time, the Jeep Cherokee for many, many years was like the top selling SUV in like the country. So, we're not talking like a name stuck to a credit product. You know, I own two Jeep Cherokees, and they were excellent vehicles. I had no problem with them. So, and at the same time, does a tribe or group of people get exclusivity on a name or word? Is there another meaning for the word Cherokee? I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure it does mean something, but going on with that whole thing is like, okay, did the tribe actually call themselves Cherokee, or it's just that what we're calling it now? So like there's a lot of like I'm up in Oklahoma right now, right? And there's a lot of tribal land out here, and it's maybe spelled a certain way, but it's not pronounced that way. You know, like Miami, right? It's actually Miami, but it's spelled Miami. So are we getting finicky with the whole pronunciation? And maybe Cherokees, that's how it's spelled, but I'm not entirely sure on that. So I think they're kind of making an issue out of it, maybe more for political purposes than anything else, because I haven't heard a whole lot over the decades of them making an issue over a Jeep called Jeep. And like I said, Jeep put out a good product. I don't see why they'd be offended by the fact that, you got a product, it works, it's great, people love it, and you got your name on it. Now, would anybody else even know what the word Cherokee meant if it wasn't for the brand of Jeep putting that out? I think it's debatable.
Yeah, I could see this band's purpose, besides him like sounding and acting like Ted Cruz, just the Native American version, which was really weird. I could see if they wanted maybe like a profit deal or something with Jeep, or even maybe them to get more involved with the name. That would be awesome, right? I mean,
Well, that
why
would be
not just
just
go
obvious what they were doing then.
right? I mean, like, right. That I think that would be perfectly okay. But to like come out and say that this is like denigrating to, Cherokee Native Americans, which I think, if I remember correctly, my ancestry, I want to say from what I've heard is Cherokee is in my blood, at least for the small, tiny percentage of Native American I have. But yeah, I mean, like if they want to deal with Jeep, I think it's amazing. But as to say like this is negative towards them or something, like because they're using the name, I mean, like how many other places have names or people have names on them? Like I think about the Dallas Cowboys. It's like Cowboys, like are Cowboys offended? Like they are a group of people. They specifically, work on farms, work with animals, whatever it is. But like, are the Dallas Cowboys or are Cowboys mad at Dallas because they're using that name? And this is like a continuous thing. Like, okay, maybe like Redskins, I could kind of see. And honestly, if you look at any of the Native American teams in sports names, Redskins are probably the most obvious offensive name than like say the Braves or something.
But it didn't like the Redskins didn't become an issue. I mean, how long has that team been around? The 1920s? And it's never been an issue. In fact, I think they routinely had like tribal leaders come out and throw out the first pitch and stuff. So I think it depends on how it's being used, and it only seems like it's been an issue for a lot of this stuff. And maybe it should have been an issue earlier on, and just nobody
Right.
thought about it. But if nobody thought about it, could it have really been an issue? And it only seems like in the last couple of years we've gotten hypersensitive about names and stuff, where people are offended that you use their name on their products, like they want some kind of exclusivity on it. So.
Yeah, and it's like I like that issue too, right there. I mean, no one's calling Native Americans Redskins nowadays. Nobody. I've never even heard that term but used negatively towards Native Americans. And I think everyone in the United States is like highly respectful towards Native Americans. And like I've said in the past, like there needs to be more efforts brought towards them. Yeah, it was, a thing of the past, and um, it was a fight of land, which is, legacy of colonialism, whatever it is. But I also think, now that those times are over, we should definitely have good amends with these people, and, really bring up those ties, get closer with them. And I'm glad that they do have their own governments and stuff. I think that's like great, phenomenal deal. But I also think we need to get more involved with them to help them with like the drug issues and things like that in their communities.
Well, see, that brings up an interesting topic, which, by the way, my grandma or great grandma was 3/4 Cherokee, right? So I don't find offense to it. I mean, but maybe because I'm not steeped in that culture. But what makes a lot like I don't know if you've ever been to some of these I don't want to say tribal lands. Shoot, wherever it's called, where the tribe has their land or whatever, right? Shoot, anyway, regardless, a lot of these places, reservations. If you go to a lot of these reservations, they're real shitholes in a lot of places, right? Especially like Navajo and stuff like that. And I feel sad for a lot of these, but there's a cultural issue on it, because I remember going one time, and I'm not gonna say where, but it was one of these tribal casinos / truck stops, and you had the little boys just running around the shop peeing on everything, all over the bathroom, and they're a lot like, I don't say Middle Easterns, where they're really strict on the girls, right? But they let the boys run around like animals, and I think that contributes to a large amount. They have a large problem of like rape and stuff on these tribal lands, and it's like, well, if you have a culture where it's acceptable for the boys to do whatever they want while you're being extremely strict on the girls, what do you think is going to happen? So I'm not entirely sure a lot of these tribes have a leg to stand on for morality when they're dealing with issues like you brought up. They have a really high drug. They have a real high. I know part of this is probably genetics. They have a real bad problem with alcohol. They have a real bad problem. I mean, there's signs everywhere out here about, hey, you don't have to take abuse, right? Well, why do tribal women are some of the most abused women in the world? I think it's like 1 out of 3 Native American women will be abused in her lifetime, right? Which is, to me, is unacceptable. And why do we have that issue? It's like, well, because it's kind of a cultural issue within the tribe that they're trying, which rightfully so, trying to get that fixed. But it's still an issue. So, where has the tribe gotten to the point where they can claim some kind of morality issue for somebody using their name when they have a lot of issues that they really need to look at and fix themselves?
Yeah,
So.
and my last note on this is all I'm saying is the KKK, I would say maybe white nationalists, neo-Nazis are loving this stuff. They're loving it. I was telling my wife, I said, when they did the Super Bowl and they had protests outside of it because they want to change now the Kansas City Chiefs name, which I'm like, wow, this is like really getting crazy because that's, I don't know how to say it, Kansian? What are those people called in Kansas? Kansansans?
I have no idea.
I don't know the name for it. But anyways, they're, really, and which was also Missouri. So Missourians. But anyways,
Minnesota.
yeah. So like, they're really connected, but they have this protest right outside the game. And I said, you know what? It'd be hilarious if some racist people came up and protested with them. It's like, yeah, let's get the name removed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, they could literally go out protest with them against the name to get it removed. And I'm like, how would people feel at that point? I think they would completely change their stance on this, right? Like if the racists came out and did that, like they would definitely be like, okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and keep all these Native American names. I think as long as the tribes
Today
and
in
whatnot,
2021, as chief of the Cherokee.
if they had agreements, I think with these teams and stuff, it would probably be a lot better. And not such an issue that it is right now. Anyways, let's go on to our next bigger topic. Went a bit longer on that than I thought we would.
It's an interesting topic. I mean, it's something we'll have to explore later.
All right, so Justice Clarence Thomas, Fox News is our news pick today, by the way. So usually we've done like MSNBC and things like that, but Fox it is.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas issuing a big warning today about the future of U.S. elections. Justice Thomas dissenting as the High Court ruled 6-3 not to review 2 Pennsylvania presidential election cases. Thomas argued the court should look at the cases to resolve whether non-legislators, like election officials or courts, have any power to set election rules, like easing mail-in voting restrictions. Writing, these cases provide us with an ideal opportunity to address just what authority non-legislative officials have to set election rules and to do so well before the next election cycle. The refusal to do so is inexplicable. Now, Thomas says it's fortunate that election rulings by Pennsylvania Supreme Court did not involve enough ballots to affect the outcome of the 2020 election. But he argued changes to mail-in voting or other election rules right before an election make the voting process prone to fraud and mistrust. Writing, we failed to settle this dispute before the election and thus provide clear rules. Now we again failed to provide clear rules for future elections. The decision to leave election law hidden beneath a shroud of doubt is baffling. By doing nothing, we invite further confusion and erosion of voter confidence. Our fellow citizens deserve better and expect more of us. Thomas's dissent comes as all House Democrats signed onto a new election reform bill today known as the For the People Act. Democrats say it would create national automatic registration, expand early voting, and simplify voting by mail. Republicans argue it would undermine election integrity. The bill is set to be looked at in early March.
Well, Kenny, first of all, let me point out, we did not plan on matching today with this purple on purple. Just kind of noticed. This is not planned. It's not planned. Kenny,
I'll to wear something different.
I'll let you take this first part on your thoughts to this.
I mean, okay, so first of all, I think Thomas Clarence just nailed it, right? And this is why Thomas Clarence is one of my favorite Supreme Court judges. And if you haven't seen it, you got to go back and watch his confirmation hearing, where he spoke about what happened to him while he was being confirmed. It was just absolutely ridiculous the amount of garbage people were piling on him without any evidence. So, but regardless, he literally, like me and you, we could have spit those same words out. I'm pretty sure we have been, for months about the situation with the election. It's like, okay, part of the issue is whether or not those allegations of fraud happened, whether or not it was real or not, they still happen, right? And they made enough sense that there's plenty of people, me included, that don't believe those election results, right? And you have to understand what their argument was. Okay, so the argument isn't whether or not the legislation could have done what they did legally, is the fact that they did it, and now it tainted their election. But the Supreme Court's position is, well, but the law says that they could do it. But the problem is they changed the law illegally. So when you do that, you now disenfranchise. It's like the state governor of Texas came out and says, look, because you all changed your rules, what we understood as a legal ballot now changed. Because here's the deal. You like if a government changes their ballots like that, it's not that a particular side of the government is being disenfranchised, right? They are disenfranchising their own people, because now they have changed what it means. Okay, so and this goes back to one of our first shows we ever did. When we have an election, right, you have a ballot, right? If you do not fill out that ballot properly and do everything you're supposed to do, that you know well in advance you're supposed to do it, that ballot is not legal. So that's why Trump was coming out saying, we will count all legal votes. So when the state legislation, actually it wasn't even the state legislator, it was bureaucrats in the legislature who came and changed how to do the ballots, which opened it up for fraud. So, and like I said, Texas demanding that another state, have clear rules, or say, hey, look, we shouldn't count those ballots because it wasn't done properly. Well, state of Pennsylvania disenfranchised all the voters in Texas. Texas had a clear legal case. And the fact that the Supreme Court wouldn't even touch it, because there's no other place for a state-to-state suit. You can't just go to a lower court, because, a lower court, is below, the level of a state. So there was no other place for Texas to go but the Supreme Court. And the fact that they wouldn't even look at it, is problematic, because, disenfranchise, Texas voters. So when we look at that, this says, Clarence Thomas nailed it on the head. Where, okay, look, we're not resolving the fundamental issues of how we got here in the first place. And it's baffling why. I mean, it's just, and what has to argue is, just like, the suppressor issue, right? Where it's clear that the federal government doesn't have the authority to regulate such things, but we can't get it to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court quote says it could fundamentally change how we do the NFA. Well, that's your job. Your job is to see if it's legal. You're not there to protect the government, and that's what it appears to be doing. And then we're going to have an issue with, in the next election, if you have no place to redress your grievances because the court is obviously stacking it in a particular favor, well, guess what? All those people who feel disenfranchised are under no authority to listen to anything the Supreme Court says in the future. And I think that's the major issue that Clarence Thomas is pointing out that we're going to face down here. So.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely should have ruled something on this. The legal precedent that was set, this is not the way to go about it. There should be some type of legal precedent. And basically, they're saying that there's not. We had states changing voting laws like, a month out? Pennsylvania I think it was a month out.
It was a month out. But here's the deal. Okay, so if I get a ballot from, like, the state of Texas, state of Texas says I have to have, my real ID or whatever. And why is it wrong to request that the person voting is a legal resident of your state? Okay, because if you're allowing people who shouldn't be voting in your state, you're disenfranchising the people who have the legal authority to be there. And maybe it's a small amount, but that's beside the point. They're trying to say, well, it wouldn't have affected the election. Well, how do you know? You haven't even looked at any of the evidence. You're just assuming it didn't. And then, like I said, it's still an issue where you're disenfranchising your own people for what? Your own political views. That's not right either. So, Texas cannot feel that their votes mattered if you allowed 2 other states or 3 other states to jack with their own election. Because look, we all agree, and this kind of falls under.
For you, Kenny. So do you think, as a libertarian, I think it's perfectly fine for localities or states to kind of have their own rules when it comes to, voter ID, whatever it is, the way that they count it. Now, I do disagree with the fact that they, you can't change the rules a month out. Now, if they did this like a year before or something like that, I'd be perfectly fine with that. So maybe that's something the Supreme Court should have ruled on, is if you
See,
change
we have a social contract thing, right? We
yeah,
have a social contract thing where, okay, so as a Texan, I would say now is it by the Constitution? Is elections are supposed to be handled by the federal government or the state government? Well, the Constitution says the state government, right? But let's say Arizona. Yeah, I'm just going to pick on Arizona. Allowed 11 million illegals to come across the state and then started letting them all vote, right? Well, okay, so we have a I would say almost like a gentleman's agreement, right? Where I recognize I recognize your state's right to vote under these parameters. So this is what we call the social contract. And you recognize my state's, residents, and then we all agree, okay, there's a set standard for how we all vote. You have to be a US citizen, you have to live in your state for XYZ amount of years to vote in that state, in that county, right? So when all of a sudden, I'm just going to pick on Arizona. Arizona decides to change the rules. Well, now you're telling it's like two people living in a house, right? And you agree, who's buying groceries and how groceries are going to be split up. And then all of a sudden, one person decides to invite the neighbors over to eat all the food, right? Okay, so how is that fair to your original agreement of how you were going to split up, the grocery bills, the light bills, and all this other stuff? Well, now you're allowing other people to, take advantage, of what I'm doing. So you're disenfranchising me for what I've been doing, for your own personal gain. Okay, so we're going to have a point where Texas is I'm just going to say Texas or whatever other state's going to say, you know what? Y'all can do whatever you can do. We're not going to recognize it anymore. Because like we all recognize what was a set standard for a vote to count legally. And if Pennsylvania decides to change it all of a sudden and allow different people to vote or whatever, that's not Texas disenfranchising Pennsylvania. That's Pennsylvania's own legislation disenfranchising their own people because they have now fundamentally changed how we count elections and allowed, fraud or whatever, even if it happened or not happened, there's still questions on that to happen in their own state, disenfranchising everybody. That's not Texas or Washington or whatever making
so what
an
you're
issue out of
saying
it.
is like not like a national federal law to like regulate how the votes are counted, but what you're saying is there should be like a gentleman's agreement where it's understood that like here's the basic parameters for so for example, I'll say Steven Crowder yesterday released a kind of like a investigation on voter roll call and matching the names to addresses, and they had this big list, and they went in person to check these addresses that didn't exist to any home. Like there's literally just not a home there at all, like several locations. So I mean,
That's what I brought up last time about
yeah,
at
so
the Arizona.
yeah, so I mean, they need to do like further investigative work on this. I'm not gonna just someone could have wrote down, many people could have wrote down wrong addresses or something. um so that's like something that needs to be followed up on. So
Well, see,
I
a lot
was
of homeless
body, but
people a lot of homeless people will use like an abandoned park's address, right? And one could argue, well, they're technically still citizens of that state or whatever. But when you have, and I brought this up on the last show, hey, look,
yeah,
if you have thousands upon thousands of ballots from people you cannot prove live in your state or have ever lived in your state, whether those allegations are real or not, you have just cast doubt on your state elections. And for a state legislature to come back and say, well, we didn't count those. Well, how do we know that you
yeah,
didn't
right.
count
It needs
those?
to be more
And the
transparent.
fact that you cannot get that case into a court anywhere on that because the courts are saying, well, it would cause more problems than it's worth. Well, it seems like it's not.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go beyond this one. Uh, Thank you, Rocky Flame, for subscribing earlier. He had a few points on
Want to
Supreme
hash those out
Court.
real quick?
He brought up Merrick Garland too, which we might talk about that in our next video. I thought about it for this one, but Let's go on to good old Newsom here, see what's the update. I know we covered it, was it last week or the week before? So it seems like it's picking up steam.
The effort to recall California's governor just submitted almost 1.1 million signatures, with nearly 670,000 signatures validated.
Organizers for Recall Gavin 2020 have until March 17th to submit 400,000 more signatures in order to get the measure on the ballot.
Here with an update is Randy Economy. He's a senior advisor to the Recall Newsom campaign. Good morning, Randy. So 1.1 million signatures is where you are today. You need 400,000 more. How do you feel about the pace you're on? Does it look like something that you will accomplish?
I think we're like we're on target, and we're ecstatic. As a matter of fact, we've collected now more than 1,720,000 signatures. That's the raw total that we have as of yesterday, as a matter of fact. So it takes a little bit of a while to go through the process to having the 58 different county register of voters to verify the signatures, and then the last one to tally them all as the Secretary of State. But I think we're feeling pretty darn confident that we're going to get this thing on a ballot this summer.
Randy, you know, I'm genuinely curious what the political affiliations are of the people who are supporting this. Do you have any sense, obviously, without revealing any details about people's, do you have any sense of, in the community, is this a Republican majority effort? Is this mixed, Republican, Democrat, and Independent? What's your sense?
It's a California thing, and we're not. We come from all walks of life. We have about 300,000 Democrats who have already signed. We have lots of Republicans, lots of independents. It's an all variety. I mean, Gavin Newsom, when he shut down the 5th largest economy in the world, and opened up the prisons and let out the inmates and locked us down, 45 million of us. I mean, that became a real problem. And we realized that we were onto something pretty special here. We didn't understand the momentum of the movement until he went to the French Laundry, that exclusive restaurant in Northern California, where he spent, I think it was, $20,000 or $30,000 on dinner. I think the bar tab was $12,000 alone. And I know $12,000 in drinks in California, that's a lot of drinks. It's the hypocrisy of who he is as a man, and it's the failed leadership as a governor. We've had it, and so that's why we reach upon all lines, all demographics, all genres, and that's where it's just a California thing now.
Randy, it all comes down to math. If you want to get this on the ballot, you got to get to the 1.5. You've submitted 1.1, but many of them have, there's a percentage rate of a rejection rate of signatures. We found out in the past that who counts really matters. So who's counting? Do you have faith they will properly, count or not count signatures? And what number in the aggregate, do you have to hit to feel like for sure you get to 1.5?
Well, it's like every vote counts, every petition counts, every signature counts. We have a very sophisticated group of volunteers. We have close to 225,000 volunteers that are working in each and every county, each and every community, each and every precinct. It is a very sophisticated volunteer organization, something that we've never seen before in politics, and we continue to grow every day. So our job is to make sure that we keep the county registrars accountable, all 58 of them.
Right.
And then we make sure that after that it goes to the Secretary of State, and it's a brand new Secretary of State. Gavin Newsom just appointed her a couple of weeks ago to take Alex Padilla's place when he went to the U.S. Senate.
We got to run really quickly. Randy, we're up against a hard break. The only form of accountability bigger than a recall would be people moving out of your state. Yeah. Glad that's not happening in California.
It's happening.
I know, it's happening.
I don't know what kind of recall they call that, but
even Bill Maher, and I don't agree with Bill Maher on most of his political issues, but you got to admit the guy's smart, right? And I sent you that video clip of even Bill Maher said, "Look, we got companies leaving this place in droves.
Yeah,
there's a reason for it."
Yeah, let me. I'll touch on this first, but so that video is a couple days old, so that's at around 1.3 million, I think now. So it's about 200,000 more. The verifications for it are, I think there was around 700,000 or 800,000 for it. So it's more than half of what they've already counted as verified, which is good, because that seemed to be something they had an issue with. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think by summer they'll definitely have this done and in the bag. The real question is, and this is something I've seen before, is, are they going to actually have enough steam to like actually do anything? And let's keep in mind, okay, this is what apparently the Democrats do, at least at the federal level, is it seems like they're just paying off people at this point with stimulus checks, whatever it is. They're just handing out our money, cranking up inflation, as we were talking about earlier in at the beginning of the show, actually before the show. But so now they recently just passed their own stimulus checks in the state of California, the most in-debt state in the United States, and has higher deficit than like other countries in the world. Like they point out, it's literally the 5th largest economy. I don't know how long that's going to stay 5th largest economy. I think the next Silicon Valley might be there in Austin, from what I was reading. And I don't know if in the 60s or 70s, the tech industry is actually on the East Coast. I think it's up in Massachusetts, I think, maybe, or New Jersey. But yeah, so I mean, it's moved. So this tells me there's another possibility. Sure, California is beautiful and stuff, but if the regulations are too high, which they are, tons of businesses, as we just stated, are fleeing the state. But this comes back to, is there going to be enough steam to actually get him removed? And now with this new stimulus package in California, handing out more checks, more unemployment, it makes me question the whole process if he'll actually get recalled. I don't think he will. I think he'll push on, but I think the Republicans are definitely gaining steam to possibly take over in the next election as governor, as long as they have a good enough candidate. I like that San Diego guy that we played his political ad, like a month ago or something. He seemed to be pretty good. I like the ad a lot too. Definitely hit home, I felt like, for most Californians. Over to you, sir.
Well, I think I can sum it up in one sentence. Rules for thee, but not for me. We have a situation here where, I say that a lot, so the rules don't seem to apply to them, right? It's like they can do whatever they want, and it's like you're going to get 1.5 million.
Also,
I can almost guarantee that, right?
It doesn't apply to Cancun cruise either. Let's keep that in mind.
No, but I mean, I think that's a different issue right there. But so like the Democrats are going to come out and say, and basically California's a monoparty system, right? They really don't have Republicans, even though if you look at all their election results, it's a red state outside of 3 different counties. So I think they're going to get the 1.5 million signatures. The question is, okay, so you're going to have the Democrat. I guarantee the Democrats are going to come out and say, well, those signatures are invalid, right? And then you'll just point out and say, look, you said during the election that every vote counts, and regardless of whether you could prove it was real or not. But when it comes to recalling, USOBs, we're going to find a reason not to validate all. And they're going to come out with the rule book and say, these are the rules. Well, so were the rules when you wanted to vote, and it changed. But, this brings up a bigger fundamental question. What is the role of government? And I think, I can't remember the gentleman's name, summed it up, the job of government is to, one, provide services that cannot be handled on the private sector, right? And arguably, these things are like police officers, water management, sewage management, where they can kind of be, handled on a private basis, but it functions much better for everybody else if we have a governing body to coordinate this, right? So these are the functions of government, to provide these basic services. And part of that is to protect the citizens and, protect citizens, provide basic services, and protect the freedoms.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing for that Texas freeze and the the electricity bills, which they ended up not letting people pay in Texas. So I was happy to see that. But I was happy as a Virginia resident actually when I saw that, because Virginia, it's I want to say nationalized, but it's owned by the state. There's only one electric provider. I was like, this is the one time I'm happy that there is a state-run electric company, and it's not in Texas where it's like a bunch of different private companies. So I was actually happy at that point. But the government did step in there, fortunately. That's like rarely a time where I say fortunately the government stepped in. But
Yeah,
they,
but see, but there's certain things that are so critical that you cannot be trusted or handled by a private company, right? And arguably, electricity is one of those. Water is definitely one of those where, okay, we all agree to pay taxes, you know, because we all benefit from something, right? Like we all benefit from public water source, unless you're in Flint, Michigan. We all benefit from a police service, unless you're in Flint, Michigan. No offense to those guys, but you see what I'm saying? So there's certain things that is the role of government, you know, and when a government fails to uphold, I don't want to say its end of the bargain, but uphold its duties and responsibilities, it is no longer a valid government, right? And we have, you know, the California legislator and the governorship pandering to everybody but their own people. And now the people have woken up and says, this is not benefiting us anymore. If it's not benefiting us anymore, why do we have them? And then these guys come in basically like mafia bosses and start pushing people around. Well, okay, at that point, you're really not legitimate anymore. If you have to bully your people around and make phone calls to drive tanks in, you know, to guard, you know, whatever. I mean, it's just like the Capitol building. Well, if you have to have tanks outside your door because you're afraid of the people you're supposed to be, you know, governing or whatever, you're not a legitimate government anymore. And that's the problem that California's having. Well,
yeah.
but you see what I'm saying? So it's like they have violated the social contract, you know, by taking care. I mean, it's like, now, don't get me wrong. There are people in California prisons who have no business being there, right? You know, they had an ounce of weed on them or whatever, and maybe they had it in 2 separate bags. And well, now they just got for distribution instead of personal use. Again, you know, I think it's like the 18th or 19th Amendment where we had to have a constitutional amendment for the prohibition of alcohol, right? That was prima facie evidence that the government didn't have the right to ban anything. So there's people there, but there's also people in that jail system in California who have no business being out on the streets. You know, we like to think that everybody behind bars is, you know, wrong place, wrong time. And well, when you killed 6 people and ran over their bodies with the 18-wheeler or whatever on purpose, yeah, you should probably be behind bars. So,
yeah. And that actually brings us right into our next video here. So let's go ahead and roll right into that.
News this morning, Virginia could become the first state in the South to abolish the death penalty as early as later this week.
Yeah, lawmakers approved legislation that would end the practice less than 24 hours ago. Our Matthew Foltz tells us it's something lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say is a complex issue to navigate. Matthew.
Well, yeah, Robin, Reba, Virginia joins 22 other states to end state-sanctioned executions, and they could make history if Governor Northam signs off on this bill. Now, Delegate Mike Mullen and Senator Scott Surville carried the identical bills that were strongly supported by the governor. Mullen says that in the last 408 years, Virginia has executed nearly 1,400 people. And since 1973, there have been 140 people who have been released while on death row. Now, the legislation will make 15 capital punishment crimes, aggravated murder, punishable by a life sentence. Some who are against the legislation were discouraged that an amendment was killed that would have made all capital murder cases a true life sentence.
Under this bill, there's a very good possibility that a person convicted of capital murder is going to be out of prison in a much shorter period of time.
Now, right now, there are 2 men who currently sit on death row here in Virginia. They face a life sentence and no parole. Now, we're told that this legislation could be on Governor Northam's desk as early as this week, Robin, Reba.
All right, Matthew Foltz reporting live for us.
All right, so actually that legislation is on his desk right now. So it's a little outdated. You know, obviously me as a libertarian, which I've stated this before on the death penalty with us. I'm glad it's getting removed. I think it's odd though, you know, that they keep. It's odd to me that Virginia is technically a southern state. Like, yeah, I was in the Confederacy.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I was in the Confederacy, and like, it was one of the primary states with a lot of the battles in the Civil War. Can't deny that. But like geographically speaking, like Virginia is not that south. Although, you know, there definitely is some Southern culture throughout the entire state spread out. But, you know, death penalty, this is just one step in that direction. I think just like marijuana, as we're seeing recently, we knew this was coming for marijuana decriminalization. There's been such a big call for that. And now the death penalty going away. Most first world countries in the world do not have the death penalty. We're like literally one of the last ones with it. I think it's us in the Middle East, which might say something. But I guess China too. I guess they're over there. They're a big fan. As long as you oppose them, the death penalty is probably acceptable there.
Your last name is Uyghur.
Yeah, right. You know, we'll don't ask Biden about that. He'll just say it's just cultural differences, man. But he'll yeah, so I mean, the death penalty going away, I think it's a positive step. You know, as a libertarian, I definitely support this stuff. You know, a lot of that has to do with like the Innocence Project, as they even noted in that video, like how many people got off death row, which I'm like, that's not good. You know, and listening to those gentlemen on one of Joe Rogan's podcasts, you know, stating how many people that they've got off death row because there was evidence to prove that they were not part of that crime. That's a big deal. If you're sentenced to death, there should be like 100% effective rate on that. You know, obviously, if someone commits a crime and it's super obvious, they admit to it, whatever, go ahead, death penalty for it. However, the cost of the death penalty in the United States is so high. The government's so messed up on the system. Like, yes, they should do it in terms of, you know, it being effective. It would be a good thing. But the fact that it's so expensive now to administer the death penalty on someone, life without parole is the way to go. And some of these people even die before they even reach like old age. So that's even actually more tax dollars being saved. So unfortunately, this is where we're at, but I think it's the correct step on where to go. And I actually have a quiz question at the end to follow up with this. Right here, so we got one user, he said, America killed people for no reason, and when Trump was in office, it was corrupt. I think it's always corrupt. I mean, when is the government not corrupt? Suddenly, socially, democracy doesn't seem that bad anymore. Hey, you know what?
Let's not talk about Bill Clinton bombing other countries just to get the heat off him.
Let's not talk about Bill Clinton and the crime bills, and you know, that's not a.
Oh, that was Biden. That was Biden's baby.
Oh, well, it's both of them though. I think. Well, sorry, was it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was both of them. But and then
the assault weapons ban.
Of course, Clinton, right, with the weapons ban too. So what do you got?
Importing that stuff to Mexico. Okay, so I'm mixed on this, and I'll tell you why. This is again one of those essential functions of government, because a private company can't come in and say you have been so bad that we're going to end you. Right? This is an essential role of government. And on one side, we have, you know, certain crimes are just so heinous that there has to be a consequence for it, right? Always else, everybody in the community can get away with it, right? And that's part of supposed to be the deterrence of doing certain crimes. You know that, okay, if you do this, you're going to get executed, no questions asked, right? So that's kind of a deterrence. And like I said, there's certain kinds of people. Okay, like if you had a person go out and murder, you know, 15 families or whatever, and then they're caught on tape on 6 of them, I'm not entirely sure that is an animal that you can recuperate back into society, right? So you got to do something with them, because if you let them out again, there's a high percentage chance they're going to do it again, right? You know, repeat offenders. And you know, this is what a lot of people like who are not in law enforcement don't understand. There's some real animals out there.
Oh, yeah.
Real animals. So do we sit there and feed them for the rest of their life and house them, you know, and give them a cushy, you know, 9-to-5 exercise program? Or do you take them out back and just shoot them like the animal they really are? And I know that sounds cold, that sounds cruel, but it's part of the, you do this and these are the consequences of it. But on the other side, how many times have, you know, like that nonprofit, the Innocence Project, how many times have they found out that some of these inmates didn't do what they were doing, like they were not even there, or it was clear they were with somebody else, or they didn't have motive, and they just meant to fit the description. So we have such an incompetence and such a, it's hard, borderline bloodlust for some of these prosecutors just to get a conviction, right? Like there's no, like a lot of these prosecutors, there's no morals to what they're doing. They're just trying to get a conviction. They don't give a hoot about what they're doing, how they can destroy somebody's life. All they care about is their own numbers, and that is fundamentally wrong. Where you're putting somebody in jail, even if there's overwhelming evidence to say that they're not guilty, just to pad your own numbers. So because the government is either incompetent, corrupt, or morally bankrupt, I can't trust personally. I can't trust the government to make the proper decision on somebody's life. And I forget the passage in the Bible where it says, "Better it be that 7 guilty men go free than hang an innocent man." So I'm right up there with it. Look, if you don't know 100% that this person did this, you can't execute them.
Right. 100%.
So I think it's a mixed bag. Mixed bag. And, as far as the people that, especially like illegals or whatever, I'm perfectly fine if they did something heinous, like walked out on a boardwalk and shot an innocent lady in the back of the head and then laughed about it. I'm perfectly fine loading them up in a C-47 or whatever, flying them back over their host country, just kick them out the back door. Hey, if you feel bad, give them a parachute.
Isn't that Pinochet, I think, did that to all those people? Was it blanking on the country? Argentina?
Look,
I think it was Argentina.
This is the other thing. It's like, okay, how many people would be streaming across your border if, every once in a while, once a month, there was an airdrop, of all your bad criminals back again. You know what I'm saying? But, on top of that, part of the issue is we're spending so much money to kill somebody. Last I checked, 308 rounds was still like $1.20 a round. $1.20 takes care of your problem. You can do it with 20.
Yeah, that's why,
it's like
people. It's like the system we have is just not ideal. I mean,
$100,000 to kill somebody. I mean, it's like we can do it way cheaper. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying, like, okay, you're killing them. I understand cruel and unusual punishment, but you can hang the guy. I mean, come on, outside the governor's office, just put a couple of gallows, and for the really bad mofos, string them up, right?
I don't know about all that, but
hey, but see,
civilized man there.
The issue. Well, you can't civilize a barbaric action to a point. You know what I'm saying? It's like war. You should never go to war because it's a dirty business. There's nothing clean about it. You don't execute somebody because it's clean. You do it because it's a necessity. And I said, I'm torn because the government's so incompetent, I can't trust them.
Let me touch on one of the user comments. He was talking about social democracy. He said, I don't trust capitalism, which I don't know if I'd really put this in line with like a capitalist thing, but like we've stated on this show before, we believe that the United States is more of a status corporation type of thing. Yeah,
it's chronic corporatism. We don't have free market capitalism.
Yeah,
because
if not a capitalist country here anymore, it's ran by like corporations in a way. It's so deep in the
which is the definition of fascism, by the way.
Right.
Where you have corporate control of the government. That's really what we got. So people who are mocking capitalism works, especially if for capitalism to work, you have to have a moral and just people. Because what did Thomas Jefferson say about the Constitution or whatever? It is only for a moral and just population. For any other, it is wholly inadequate. That may have been Benjamin Franklin. Sorry, founding fathers, forgive me. But you know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where it doesn't work if you have a population that's corrupt and has no moral foundation. And that's why we're here. We're trying to, spread this. Hey, look, what you do, you have to understand why you're doing it and what makes it right or wrong. Because if you don't, none of this works. The only way you can keep animals is in cages. And if you act like an animal, you get treated like an animal, and there's nothing else the government can do about it. And that's why you have to, educate people, get involved with people, to tell them, okay, what do you believe and why do you believe it and why do you think it's right or wrong? So.
All right, Kenny. Gonna say, do you want to go with the quiz first, or you want me to go ahead with the quiz item?
You go, because mine's going to be lighter.
All right, so this is in relation to the capital punishment. And if anyone is in the chat, definitely appreciate your opinions. Give Kenny some time to think on this one. What percentage of death row inmates are innocent? In the chat, you got 10 seconds. Kenny, you got, I don't know, I guess 10 seconds too.
I'm going to say, based upon current government numbers, we can't trust any of it. Could be half, could be 3/4, could be all of them. Don't know.
All right.
I'm serious. If you can't trust the fact that your prosecuting attorney may or may not have put somebody guilty strictly to pad their own numbers and make them feel good, so they could put a hit piece in the newspaper about this person, it's all up for grabs. It's all up for grabs.
All right. So the number is 4%. A National Academy of Sciences study released in 2014 found that approximately 4%, I think you Googled it, 4% of death row inmates are innocent. By that math, as many as 30 of the 737 prisoners awaiting execution in California were wrongly convicted. The heinousness of the crimes cannot justify the execution of even one innocent person, which is basically what we just covered earlier. What do you
see, but the problem is that the prison system, I say prison system, because I know a lot of prison cops, and they're, for the most part, they're all good people, right? But the people who are putting those people in prison are either so corrupt or so inept, you know, that number could be much higher, and it would not surprise me at all, you know. So it's 4% of the blatantly obvious these people were not guilty.
What's your quiz question? What do we got?
To be on a lighter note, what is Coca-Cola's most popular product?
Oh, man. Hey, I've been to the Coca-Cola factory in Atlanta. It's pretty awesome.
I've been to Dr. Pepper. It's the only one worth going to.
They have one?
Yeah, it's in Waco, Texas.
Waco? Okay.
The original plant's in Waco.
Hey, I might have to go check that out. The one in Atlanta is pretty.
A long walk from your house, though. Just saying.
But the one in Atlanta is cool. They got like Cokes from all over the world, like all the different subsidiary companies. Most popular one.
Still got
I'm gonna say Coca-Cola Classic.
You are correct.
There we go.
57. I think it's 57% of all their product is still. I was told it was actually water. I tried to look it up, and I'm like, because Coca-Cola sells a lot of bottled water. I'm trying to find it out, and it says no, 57% of their product is still Coca-Cola Classic. Maybe I was asking Google the wrong question. So I was going to go over the 18th Amendment, which I believe is the 18th Amendment. You know, the issue of alcohol prohibition. I think I've already said that one.
Yeah, I think you did that one before.
It's one of those, but I figured let's go with Classic.
All right, so let's end the show here, and then we'll take some questions in the stream. But yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in and listening to another show of us flapping our gums. But yeah, catch us always on BitChute, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, of course. And then we were trying to get a Parler account, but I was like having some kind of issues or whatever, but that's fine. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in. And once again, this has been another American Experience.
Hey, thanks for watching the Red, White, and Matt Show with Kenny. Please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for another American Experience.